The third chapter of the Book of Boba Fett, The Streets of Mos Espa, had some really cool stuff mixed in with some silly stuff, but ultimately the cool stuff won out and left me satisfied, so let's get into the episode. We open on some exposition disguised as a mini history lesson for Boba Fett about the political state of Mos Espa and the three crime families that control the territory. That's interrupted by Stephen Root playing a water merchant complaining about some youths stealing his inventory. Like the mayor's majordomo, he's all about the passive aggressiveness, saying the right things but making it clear he's one of the people of Mos Espa that doesn't respect Fett as the new daimyo. He says everyone is waiting to see what kind of leader Fett will be, and I think the merchant is giving him a bit of a test. Handle this problem the right way, the way we want, and we will reward you. So Boba goes into town, confronts the speeder gang, and recruits them. He listens to their story and learns that they steal because they have no choice. There's no work, they have no money, and they're being exploited by this water merchant who charges an insane amount for a necessity to their survival. So he offers them means to provide for themselves, and he demands the water merchant lower his prices, which obviously he's not a fan of. The rich of Tatooine, like the mayor, Garsa Fwip, and now this merchant, all seem to expect Boba Fett to act in his own self-interest, to do the thing that makes him more money and more power at the expense of those who have none. But Fett's experiences with the Tusken Raiders have shaped him into the leader he's becoming, someone who looks out for the good of the tribe, not just the chief. And hoarding water especially would be a big no-no. Speaking of the Tuskens, it's time for a flashback. As much as I enjoyed the flashbacks in Chapter 2, I'm glad this episode mixed up the format, letting most of the story play out in the present day. But Boba rides into Mos Eisley to pick up their tribute from the Pike Syndicate, but they refuse to pay both the Tuskens and the Swoop Gang we've been seeing, and Fett promises to deal with the gang. Unfortunately, while he was gone, the Swoop Gang swooped in and murdered the entire Tusken tribe, which I wouldn't call a surprise exactly, but it was still sad. Everything with the Tuskens has been very tropey and familiar, but storytelling tropes may as well be a Star Wars trope at this point. It made the most sense for this to be the fate of the Tusken Raiders, but it would have been nice to be surprised. Regardless, it was effective and emotional, and Temuera Morrison really sold the sadness he was feeling as he said goodbye to this chapter of his life. And I do look forward to seeing what he has in store for the Swoop Gang. But Boba is literally ripped out of the dream at the start of my favorite sequence of the episode. Black Chrysanthemum has already come to murder Boba, and I thought the fight scene was brutal and just all around awesome. The closest we've come to seeing a Wookiee kick this much ass is probably Chewie freeing the other Wookiees on Kessel in Solo: A Star Wars Story, but seeing Chrysanthemum throwing Boba around the room was sick. Leading into this episode this past week, I talked about how Boba seems to be abandoning the identity he forged with the Tuskens in favor of his old identity, wrapped up in the armor. So I really loved that he fumbled for his Mandalorian weapons, but they didn't save him. His gaffy stick did. He took on Chrysanthemum not with the power he inherited, but with the power he created for himself. And he's saved by the allies he has made, the tribe he is building, the gang of misfits he just hired, the Gamorreans whose lives he spared, and of course Finnick whose life he saved. This is all very George Lucas in philosophy. In the Star Wars archives he is quoted saying, "The more I studied anthropology, it became very obvious to me that one of the most important issues humans have to deal with is that the group that cooperates are much stronger than they are when cannibalizing themselves, that allowing personal greed to overrun a situation is a serious negative, and that caring about people, trying to help other people, and to move the world forward in a more compassionate manner is the best way." That's not some shocking new revelation, but it's not meant to be. George also said he wanted Star Wars to communicate not complex intellectual ideas, but very simple ideas of what creates a civilization and a civil society. So I appreciate that Jon Favreau is keeping that same spirit alive and exploring it through the character of Boba Fett. How his time with the Tusken Raiders shifted him from a selfish, greedy bounty hunter into a leader who cares for his tribe and wants all of the people he looks after to thrive, not just the rich. His ability to create allies and grow his tribe saves his life from Black Chrysanthemum, another bounty hunter and symbol of who Fett used to be. His attitude is explored further in the following scene, where he refuses to eat this extravagant feast that's been prepared for him. He mostly seems preoccupied with how he's going to respond to the latest assassination attempt, but he also seems annoyed at the excess. Again, that's probably stemming from his experiences with the Tuscans, who certainly wouldn't have ever had this much food in one sitting. But before he can make any decisions, the Hutts come to the palace to apologize. They offer a gift in the form of a new Rancor, which got a big smile from me, and we'll talk about the Rancor plenty in a bit. They claim the mayor already promised Tatooine to another criminal syndicate and announced their return to Nal Hutta. Fett releases Chrysanthemum, again showing some mercy that I'm betting will come back to help him in the future, building his tribe. He also offers some advice and says the life of bounty hunting and working for people like the Hutts isn't worth it. Down in the Rancor pit was another favorite scene of mine for this chapter. The new Rancor Keeper, played by Danny Trejo, which is awesome, explains Rancors to us, putting them in a completely different light. They're emotional and peaceful creatures unless they're threatened. They can become very loving. To put it lightly, they are misunderstood. We all know the Rancor as a terrifying monster that tried to eat Luke, but that's how it was raised and trained, for violence. You know who else was raised and trained for violence from birth? Boba Fett, raised by a bounty hunter to become a bounty hunter. The Mandalorian started the trend of giving us a new perspective on Tusken Raiders, but the Book of Boba Fett went all in on that. We're learning that not all the Tusken Raiders are like the ones we saw in A New Hope and Attack of the Clones. We're learning that Rancors aren't just mindless killing machines, and we're learning that there's a lot more to Boba Fett than just some cool armor and a jetpack. Boba and the Rancor begin their bond, which is certain to grow. Again, he's building his tribe. I look forward to seeing him ride it, and I will never watch the Rancor's death in Return of the Jedi the same way again. But that will have to wait. Boba and Fennec head to the mayor's office only to find him gone, and the Major Domo takes off in a speeder, and so begins the weakest scene in the episode. The speeder chase just didn't do it for me. I'm sure it's challenging to stage something like this in the volume, a technology that's still being developed, but it all felt way too slow. It also seemed like it was checking off every car chase trope that's ever existed, smashing through paintings, nearly hitting pedestrians, knocking debris into the street, and ending by hitting a fruit cart. Why they didn't follow Back to the Future's lead and have the Major Domo crash into some bantha poodoo, I will never know. The Major Domo confirms the mayor has been working with the Pike Syndicate. I know a lot of people are clamoring for Crimson Dawn. I definitely had that thought when the Hutts mentioned another syndicate. Crimson Dawn is certainly the more recognizable criminal syndicate to the casual fan thanks to Solo, a Star Wars story, but reading the Crimson Reign comics has me tempering my expectations. I'll warn people not to get their hopes up. I would love to be wrong, but the Pikes currently make plenty of sense for this story. They've been introduced in the series already. Boba Fett has a more recent and highly personal connection to them. I will happily and enthusiastically get on board with Crimson Dawn if that happens, but I can already see this becoming the Mephisto of this series, the thing fans start to build and hype up amongst themselves only to be disappointed in the end. So for now, let's remain focused on the Pikes. A bunch of them show up on Tatooine, Fennec claims they're going to war, and Boba says they'll be ready. We know the mayor is working with the Pikes. I wouldn't be surprised if Garsa Fwip is also in league with them, maybe even the Hutts, because I think it's a little odd to have them just pop in for a couple of scenes. But basically, I think the rich and elite of Tatooine see more profit in working with the Pikes and their spice trade. They're seeing what kind of leader Boba Fett will be, and he seems to care about elevating the entire city's population if he can. The rich are afraid they will lose what's theirs, and the Pikes are a surer bet to maintain the status quo. Overall, I really dug this episode. Yeah, the speeder chase was cheesy and slow. I wish it were more impressive, but it didn't diminish the great scenes like Chrysanthemum's attack or the bonding with the Rancor. I like where this series is headed, and how Jon Favreau is intent on making us look at familiar Star Wars things from a new perspective. Chief among them all is Boba Fett himself, and it's interesting how Boba is struggling to reinvent himself in the universe and among some of the fandom, but I, for one, am into it. Let me know what you thought of the Streets of Mos Espa down in the comments, and what you hope to see in future episodes. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel to keep up with all our Book of Boba Fett coverage, and consider checking out our Patreon page for even more. We're releasing our video reactions and audio commentaries for every episode as they release. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.